Welcome to the summer movie season roundup, where I review a bunch of movies I saw this summer. Some of the movies I'm going to discuss didn't actually come out this summer, but that's fine, doesn't matter. So I'm going to start with some new movies I saw, like Bullet Train. Bullet Train is an entertaining action movie. There isn't much else to say aside from that, but I'll try. Also, if I sound tired, it's because I am. So anyway, some of my favorite parts of this film are the action scenes, and since this was directed by David Leitch, one of the directors of the first John Wick movie, or at least I think so, he's uncredited. The action scenes were cool, well choreographed and edited. Also, it was easy to tell what was going on. I liked the focus on hand-to-hand combat with very little CGI, at least during those sequences. Some of the funniest parts of the movie were during those action sequences. They matched the goofy tone of the whole film. Visually, I thought this was great at points. I really have no issue with it there. The setting was interesting. I could tell in the opening scene before the main character gets on the train, those scenes were actually shot in Tokyo, and the bullet train itself was a good location to set this film. The focus on the one location makes it a bit more memorable. Some of my favorite action movies, like The Raid or Die Hard, are set in one location and basically play out in real time like Bullet Train does. Overall, I enjoyed the tone and that this film wasn't taking itself too seriously. I don't think this movie needed to be laugh out loud funny all of the time, since I was getting more out of the action. But geez, they ran that Thomas the Tank Engine bit into the ground by 20 minutes in, and it just keeps going.
They're getting right out of Thomas's mouth.
Right, yeah. Thomas, that's a lesson.
The humor that didn't work for me mostly were the celebrity cameos, and I won't say who's in it for those of you who haven't seen this film yet. At times it felt like the Avengers, but instead of superheroes showing up, it was a recognizable Hollywood star that is barely in the movie, and they just pop in to make kind of lame jokes that I've heard a million times before. Those scenes were so quick, I don't want to harp on them. There were two cameos in particular. They just left a bad taste in my mouth. Those were really unnecessary and took me out of the story. There were some weaker lines, such as Brad Pitt's Ladybug character saying, "I'm like bad luck on acid," but at least that tied into the story and the character, unlike the forced cameos. To talk about Brad Pitt, I liked his performance. I respect that his character was more unique than the average action hero protagonist. He was presented as a screw-up. He only happened to be there by coincidence, which is part of the themes of the movie, but he can also kick everybody's ass. Even though he is the main character, this is more of an ensemble film for sure, which is fine. I thought the rest of the cast was good too. Joey King from Wish Upon and The Kissing Booth, Brian Tyree Henry from The Eternals, Aaron Taylor Johnson from Age of Ultron. Way to list all their best hits. All the movie needed was Jared Leto and it would have been really great. They were all good in this film though. Their characters were each distinct and memorable. Again, this wasn't the kind of film where I was looking for a laugh every minute. I more wanted action, and I got more out of those action scenes than anything else. The action was playful and fun. Those sequences were spread out really well over the course of the film. There was a lot going on, which made it unpredictable and played into the convoluted fun. There are many different characters, and that tone made it feel almost like a Tarantino film, just with far more action sequences. Really though, Bullet Train becomes too silly to where it was hard to take anything going on seriously. When a character dies in The Hateful Eight, I do have a visceral reaction to that, but Tarantino films don't really harp on it too much. Those characters just die and the story moves on. This movie leans toward tugging at those emotional strings in certain scenes, and that was kind of jarring. Was I actually supposed to care about these mercenaries because they're brothers? And then they make another reference to Thomas the Tank Engine. On the other side of that spectrum, Baby Driver has characters that you actually care about, like Baby and Deborah, because they're relatable. Baby is actively trying to not be a criminal for the sake of the people in his life, but he keeps getting roped back into it. That makes you feel sorry for him. The audience understands his character much more, and even when he does things like killing other characters, you understand why he's doing it. The Monsters Inc. references in Baby Driver reminded me of the Thomas the Tank Engine bit.
They're getting right out of Thomas's mouth.
Right, yeah. Thomas, that's a lesson.
And I kept thinking how much better that film handled those jokes. It wasn't overdone.
Nah, they're a diesel.
By the time Bullet Train was over, I was saying, it's about time for this to wrap up. It didn't need to be any longer than it was. Probably could have been shorter. I also liked the post-credits scene of the film, which is just another reason it reminded me of Avengers. I liked how the post-credit tied into the main story. I'm between a 6 and a 7. I'd lean more toward a 7 just because the action scenes were really well made. It didn't need to rely on the same joke being repeated, and also those lame celebrity cameos that didn't add anything to this movie. Next film is The Gray Man, which I just saw on Netflix, and let me just start my review off by saying this movie was total ass. The Gray Man is about a convict in prison played by Ryan Gosling who is recruited to be a secret spy or something, and then he has to get some MacGuffin. This movie was too frickin' dark. Literally, I could not see anything that was happening. Why did they grade the entire movie so dark? The Batman movie was brighter than this movie was. Ryan Gosling treated the whole film like it was a joke. I couldn't take him seriously, and there's nothing to his character. Why was he the greatest spy ever? I have no idea. Ana de Armas is completely wasted. Chris Evans gives one of the worst performances I've seen from him. He's not even remotely intimidating. His character sucked. He doesn't look like a bad guy, and like Ryan Gosling, his character didn't take anything seriously that was happening. Ana de Armas and Chris Evans were much better in Knives Out. The CGI in this movie is absolutely atrocious. All of the action looks fake. The story is the most generic, crappy action movie plot you could imagine. There's a MacGuffin flash drive with some info on it that can expose a secret organization. We've seen this a million times before. The dialogue is bad. The jokes are lame. The drone shots in this movie were terrible. I just couldn't stand the action. This film uses action as a crutch instead of having a compelling narrative to push it forward. They just keep throwing in action scenes and it ends up being totally forgettable. The Gray Man had a budget of $200 million. What? I just read this. I don't even believe that. One of the worst parts is that they're leading into a sequel at the end because some of the bad guy characters are still around and they're gonna chase Ryan Gosling down. Gray Man 2? No thanks. At least it was only 2 hours, which is short nowadays. I'm giving it a 5. That's honestly being generous. It could go lower as time goes on. I'll have to think about it. Next is the film Ambulance, which isn't technically a summer movie, but it feels like one. And it's also a slightly better action movie than The Gray Man was. Ambulance is a standard action heist film that takes place in Los Angeles, kind of like the film Heat. The drone shots in Ambulance were much better and more cool than the ones in The Gray Man. Ambulance actually makes the most of its modest budget of $40 million, which is not a lot for an action movie. I couldn't really tell the budget while watching it. There are lots of action scenes and car chases and shootouts. I like this movie, and I'm going to preface that by saying this might be the stupidest movie I've ever seen in my entire life, but I still enjoyed it. Michael Bay plays up the whole Hollywood rock star director persona, and his movies basically reflect that. This movie is full of cliches. If you're going into this expecting something else at this point, I don't know what to tell you. I would actually say this is one of Bay's better movies that I've seen from him recently. It's definitely better than Transformers 2, 3, 4, and 5, that's for sure. I thought the action was decent. People criticizing the editing, referring to it as kind of ADHD, which I didn't really have a problem with that. I think it's just shot and edited that way to make it more intense. The action is always fine in his movies, even his bad movies. My criticisms with his movies are usually the writing, the comedy, and the underdeveloped characters. Since this movie is 2 hours of car chases, it didn't really need great character development or anything. The corny backstories they gave these characters were fine. That's exactly what I was expecting going into it. It's a bottle film, kind of. Not really, it cuts around a lot, but a lot of the film takes place in that ambulance. This movie kind of has a pro-police message, which I kind of expect from his movies. They have very ham-fisted social commentary. Isaac Gonzalez is supposed to be an EMT. Are you kidding me? Is that a joke? There's lots of really over-the-top editing. It was actually making me laugh at how corny it was. Throughout this whole film, every emotion is heightened. Everything is completely over the top in a very Michael Bay sort of way, and at least it was consistent within the film. It's a hollow story, there's not a lot going on, but Michael Bay can construct some pretty cool action sequences and set pieces for his films. You can't help but feel like Michael Bay has given up on trying to write characters that aren't some kind of cheesy action movie character. There was one really stupid mask joke with a lady in an elevator which could have been cut out. Not that I really give a shit, I'm just saying this movie kind of overstays its welcome with a runtime time of over 2 hours. If this movie had been trimmed down to a reasonable length, I would have raised the rating maybe. There are plenty of scenes that could be cut because they're over the top, or they didn't add much to the film, or they just weren't funny. I thought the group of bank robbers at the beginning was the most cliche group of characters I could imagine, especially the one guy who was from Brooklyn or something, and he called someone a Mama Luke, and then he told one cop that he was going to get him some cannolis. It's kind of sad this movie flopped in the box office because I think it's better than something like the Transformers movies, which made much more money. I rewatched this movie in 4K on my brand new 75-inch TV. It feels like it's made to be enjoyed on a big screen like that with the sound blasting loud. I'd rate it a 6. The last movie I'm going to talk about is going to be a change of pace because I just talked about 3 action movies. So the last film we're going to discuss here is Marcel the Shell. I saw this in theaters and I really enjoyed it. There's not a ton to say aside from I really recommend this film to anyone. I think it's very cute and funny. It's super short, which makes me feel eager to rewatch it because it's such a light viewing. The animation was great. I felt it really served the story. I liked how this film was shot documentary style. I felt that added a lot to the humor of the film as well. There were also scenes that break that and go into just like the standard movie format, shot reverse shot, and I do like those moments too. The character of Marcel is very endearing and lovable, and yeah, it's just very funny and sweet. The character of Dean, who's playing the director of the documentary in the movie, is actually the director of the film. He used to be married to Jenny Slate, who plays Marcel, and there was a lot of interesting subtext going on there, which I'm not going to give away if you haven't seen the movie, because it's still not out yet on demand or anything. But I think if you know that, you'll definitely be able to pick up on what's going on there. So yeah, another great A24 movie. This is one of my favorites of the year as well. Definitely see this movie as soon as you can because it's definitely light viewing and it's very entertaining. I do think this is a good movie for families as well. It's a cut above most family films I see because it is tackling some more mature subject matter, but I do think kids can enjoy it in the same way I enjoyed early Pixar films. It's just a bit more mature and interesting for something that's for a kid. It's a movie made for everybody. It's very endearing and sweet, and I would give Marcel the Shell an 8. Thanks for watching, blokes.
Nah, they're a diesel.